All right. Welcome to everybody. Good to see everybody here. Second Friday meeting here on September 30th. So I'm just going to start with my little opener, which is basically the blog I wrote today. Just to, again, I'm always just trying to put information out, put my perspective out for people to consider. That's why, I write things that are on my mind, and now I've been posting them as blogs on the website. So based on everything that happened this week, I'm going to read my little blog. I had some revelations and epiphanies go off in my head this week. The first one started this past Sunday when Glenn from Nevada asserted that I was going to end up in a federal prison. He suggested that it doesn't matter if I'm doing everything lawful and peaceful. They are simply going to try to make an example out of me. He cracked a rift in my brain and got me thinking about that as being a theoretical possibility. In the end, that is just fear-mongering. Perhaps his assertions were just a projection of his own fear. After all, I have received numerous comments on many of my videos from cowards who have expressed fear over joining our efforts to build a righteous army of we the people who are the militia. I have always indicated that nothing can or will happen to me unless the Creator, Lord God Almighty, allows it. And if that be the case, so be it. The second one came about as a result of my video recorded conversation with Charles and Eric from Texas regarding law, legalities, and jurisdiction. In short, Eric suggested that I separate the political and social aspects of our righteous army of we the people who are the militia from having anything to do with the militia. His suggestion was based upon entanglement issues that might arise as a result of certain persons being made to feel alienated or uncomfortable about joining the militia as a result of any religious or spiritual connotations we might put forth in our national militia meetings. The bottom line there is that God will not be alienated from our national militia meetings. Furthermore, the 10 Commandments, which is the moral law of God that was given to men and women as a guideline for proper and decent human behavior, is itself political and social in nature. Acknowledgement of the Creator, Lord God Almighty, our Heavenly Father, the God of life, and respect for the 10 Commandments is the basis for political and social structure and stability in a godly nation. The government of the USA has been infiltrated and hijacked by godless communists. That is precisely why our nation is falling apart, which is why the militia is needed now more than ever before. Anyone who watches all 12 hours of the historical documentary, Europa, The Last Battle, which is the top video on the videos page at both thebigvirushoax.com and righteousarmy.org, will know exactly who and what the communists and their infiltration and hijacking of our government and other governments throughout the world is all about. It is about a godless new world order, one world government taking over and controlling the entire world. The third one came about as a result of seeing a news broadcast indicating the FBI is now going after Christians. That too is just another fear-mongering tactic to silence men and women who would put forth godly messages that promote traditional family values, racial integrity and preservation, male and female gender identity, and moral virtue. I have always said that even if God is nothing more than a concept, just a figment of imagination, it is the greatest concept and highest order of imagination because it is the basis for morality, ethics, principles, decency, pursuit of truth and justice, moral virtue, and natural reproductive order. The fact that it is understood the 10 Commandments were given to mankind by God is the ultimate indicator that political and social issues should be based upon morality and moral virtue. The militia of the USA exists for the express purpose of defending and protecting the unalienable rights, peace, safety, and happiness of godly, God-respecting, God-fearing men and women within the USA. The USA is supposed to be one nation under God. It was never intended to be a godless, communist, tyrannical dictatorship. Communism promotes godlessness, immorality, perversion, indecency, filth, and violence. Our righteous army of we the people, who are the militia, is uniting and organizing in opposition to the communists who have infiltrated and hijacked our government and our nation. You are either for us and with us, or you are against us. We, the people of the USA, must unite, organize, and stand together as one nation under God, as one militia under God. All others are the enemy. This is a fight of good versus evil. So that's my little opener. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dan, who's going to chair. And Dan, go ahead and let Eric, let Charles have a brief opener after me right now. Charles, give a little introduction about what we're going to discuss. Just a brief, what you told me on the phone, what you want to discuss, and then go ahead and turn it over to Dan, and he'll take the first hand there. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I posted in the chat window 2 web links to 2 documents concerning the coronavirus issue and how an American national common law court should respond to it with a 7th Amendment jury trial verdict. Okay, and Mike and I have talked about this, I've advocated the proposition, and I think Mike is receptive to it, that we need to be producing work product. We need to be producing things that are bringing us together as a community, that are specific real world projects that will help us be in position to confront the lawless, murderous aggressors that are pretending to be our legitimate government. Okay, it's great to have these theoretical discussions, but that's all it is. It's just theoretical discussions, and we're not doing anything to really put us into position to stop the evil empire conspirators from taking us over. And this coronavirus jury verdict, that puts us in a lawful position. That 7th Amendment jury trial verdict, that gives us a lawful authority to judicially issue arrest warrants, if and when that is strategic for us to do. See, if we don't got a jury verdict, then we haven't completely followed due process of law. Complete due process of law for final judgment requires a unanimous jury. If we don't have that, we're hurting puppies. But once we've got it locked down, then we're in the highest legal lawful due process of law position that any court in America can do. And the judicial power is the supreme power for governing how force will lawfully be administered in this country. And so when we take the judicial power within our constitutional parameters, 6th and 7th Amendment, and we bring together legitimate jury verdicts, then we are in position, we're on the strongest position on the legal constitutional chessboard to fight against the evil empire conspirators. And so that's what I believe, as we get sorted through everything here, we need to start bringing it together to focus on real world issues and positioning in this spiritual battle with things like this. I yield.
Okay, Eric, you're up next.
Unmute, Eric.
All right. No, I was just trying to get free. I'm multitasking. You have to forgive me. So I absolutely concur with Charles. I think he's spot on. That's exactly right. We do have to follow due process. And so that's my response to that. But in the bigger picture, what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a minute to respond to Mike. I believe in what you're doing, Mike. I do. And I think it's valiant, and I would like to try and support it as much as I can. But I think because you're taking the position you're taking, I just need to give a disclosure at this point and let it be known that I support the American Constitution of the United States for America, and I support the Declaration of Independence. And those documents were geared towards freedom of all. And in order to have freedom and peace, which is the most important aspect of what our forefathers wanted for us, was to just uphold the peace, which is quintessential to common law. I need to just, make sure that it's known that I am not a member of this organization. I am a participant, and I'm acting as just someone who's presenting and offering informational resources. So with that said, I'll yield.
Okay, Mike, you're next.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Eric. Let me kind of come back on that a little bit. So what kind of was going through my mind when Eric said that was, I'm thinking, okay, so what did I do? I basically just said, here I am, a person who believes that we're one nation under God, but we know right off the bat, there's plenty of people that don't believe that. I'm a person who believes in the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. We know there's all kinds of so-called Americans, people that profess to be Americans, that don't believe in that. I'm not only are there many people that are so-called Americans that don't believe what I believe, but there's many Americans that are all for things that I'm opposed to, right? Which I mentioned frequently, right? How Hollywood, all the media is constantly pushing perversion. I don't believe that homosexuality, transsexualism, and transgenderism needs to be in our kindergarten classes and needs to be pushed in society and the public domain. That's absolutely my position. I know there's millions of Americans who agree with me on that, but they have been kowtowed. They've been cow-whipped. They're like dogs with their tails between their legs who have been ashamed and intimidated and humiliated. And they need to start standing up for what they believe in and speaking out for what they believe in. Having said that, what kind of goes through my mind also is I think about the answer to me. I mean, it's a little disheartening for me to hear Eric feel that he needs to put a disclaimer and separate himself from us to some extent, based on my assertion that God should be part of the militia, that one nation under God should be our theme, and that, well, everything I read, right? I mean, just based on what I read, that he would take a fractional exception based on what I read, it would be concerning to me, at least disheartening. So as I factor that though, and I think in terms of where I believe he's coming from, it's like what was going through my mind was, hey, we the people are the militia, period. I mean, everything I've said so far is not only lawful and peaceful and open and transparent, but factual, right? Everything I've done is just fact-based. It is we the people who constitute the militia, whatever label somebody wants to put, or unorganized, organized, statutes that are de facto and not, part of the original Constitution, or, statutes that are part of de facto in a corporation that might be contrary to what those of the, de jure government would believe. We've got factors there. We've got issues just with regards to variations that may exist based on statutes that aren't law, that are contrary to the law. I mean, I've read Arizona's statutes on the militia, and they pretty much say any group of persons who gather as an armed militant group are committing a class 5 felony. That needs to be outlawed by the Supreme Court. We have the right to assemble. We have the right to bear arms, and we are the militia. We constitute the militia. So they've done all kinds of things to try to stifle and minimize we the people's ability to rise up in force, knowing that armed force is the last alternative, right? Per Eric's reference to the Declaration of Independence, whenever the government becomes destructive of our peace, safety, happiness, and our rights, it is the right of people to abolish or change that government in any way that we need to in order to make that happen. And of course, we're always met with this challenge of how I've pointed out from the beginning, Absolutely. They're hoping and banking on all kinds of patriotic Americans getting hardcore and coming on strong, like they're going to go storm the government so that they could take them into custody as seditionists and insurrectionists. I believe that's already happened. I believe there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of hardcore badass patriots that should be and would be here on our meetings where I could tame them. And I could say, guys, no. Keep your cool, right? Keep your cool. Don't say things or do things that's going to give them an opportunity to take you into custody, because they're looking forward to such opportunities. So it's a gingerly delicate thing, but be smart. Just know that everything we're doing is lawful, peaceful, organized, open, transparent, smart, and law is the tip of our proverbial spear, right? So even knowing that that is the approach we're taking, and yet there's still lingering concerns people have. You know, so when it comes into this issue of me further taking, or at least taking from the beginning, a position that it is those of us who can be labeled as center to right, which includes such labels as Christian or God believing or traditional family values or Trump supporter or conservative or Republican. I mean, all those titles are representative by and large of the majority of American people who identify as being Christians, or at least identifying as believing in God, believing in traditional family values and morality. So knowing that a communist regime has infiltrated and taken over our nation, as they've done to other nations, and they own and control the media, where they spew out perversion and propaganda and BS, and they hijack our elected government officials and pay them to do their bidding for them, it becomes an issue where, hey, we have to do something. If we don't do something, we're screwed. The future is bleak. And this is, again, aside from the points I've made about, hey, if there's a Jesus Christ coming back in the crowds of glory, great. But I don't think he's sitting up there looking down, you know, expecting us to do nothing. I believe that we have an obligation to take responsibility to try to right the ship. That's where I've been coming from day one. So the last thing I'll say, what was going through my mind as I was listening to the disheartened, you know, comment coming from Eric there, knowing that I guess I could just give it as an example. Okay, we're the militia, and I'm not, and we're not telling anybody they can't join us. So if they are offended, or they are uncomfortable about us having a prayer, or about us speaking for morals, about us speaking for God, about us speaking for traditional family values, then that's on them. That's not on us. And the equivalent of that would be like with the coronavirus global pandemic, scamdemic bullshit with wearing face diapers. If you want to wear a face diaper, go wear it. You cannot force me to wear it. If you want to go get jabbed with poisons, go do it. That's your choice.
Well, I think you're making a
I'm not finished. You cannot force me to do it, and you cannot take my rights away from me without due process of law. So having said all that, that's the equalizer to me, is we're not telling anybody they can't be here. And if they're uncomfortable or they feel alienated, that's on them. That's not on us. I yield.
Well, that's not necessarily the case, Michael. That's no different than my argument that I made on another call. And
Eric,
listen,
I'm sorry, you didn't raise your hand, brother. We're trying to keep.
Oh, okay. Well, so I no opportunity to respond because you're addressing what I said.
No, you do have an
opportunity
opportunity to respond, but you should have put your hand up quickly, because you probably would have put it up before.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know we're on Mike's call.
Go ahead now that you got started. Keep going, Eric, because you're responding.
Well, I just think it's important for you to hear me and not just assume that it has nothing to do with being disheartened or anything. I mean, you're missing the whole point. It's nothing personal, Mike. It has nothing to do with what you're doing or what you're saying. It has totally to do with my expertise, my knowledge base, and what I find to be comforting and discomforting. And if I want to create a degree of separation between something, well, that's my prerogative as American, and you shouldn't take it personally. You shouldn't take it as me being against this in any way, shape, or form. What I am against is turning the militia into something that is opinion-based, and religion can be a matter of opinion. Just because you and I feel differently about it doesn't make it right or wrong. For example, in my personal life, I work a lot with churches. In fact, churches support my efforts more than just about anybody else do. But this is not the venue for that kind of conversation. This is a venue for a conversation about how the people can come together in community and support one another. If they want to discuss religion, go have a Bible study, go discuss religion, but don't come to the militia call debating religious philosophy, because you're going to detract from the point. And that's why I created a degree of separation, because if this is not in accordance with the law, in accordance with the tradition, then I have to create a degree of separation because of my personal mission in this world. And it's not to create the revival in the church. That's not my job. That's the church's job. My job is to help the people to organize in a lawful fashion, county to county, and learn how to take their power back, regardless of what their viewpoints are and their opinions are. Makes no difference to me. I don't care if you're an Alpha Centaurian. If you were born here, well, by God's sake, you're an American, period. And that's my point. And so please don't take it personally, Mike, because it really has nothing to do with you, what this call stands for, or anything that you're doing in any way, shape, or form. I yield.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate that. Just going back on Eric now, I appreciate what you're saying. And maybe I shouldn't have used the word disheartened, but yeah, that was a little bit personal and emotional. Yeah, because there is a degree of camaraderie, right? I mean, we like to have camaraderie with one another and feel that we're brothers, in all things, right? So that's probably where it was coming from. To the extent that
We
you
are
mentioned,
brothers in Christ.
right? But to the extent that you mentioned, people not coming here. So what about in theory, somebody in a militia meeting saying a prayer, opening with a prayer, closing with a prayer, if they wanted to?
Hey, you know what? That's fine. As long as they're praying to just God in general, I think that's fine. Now, if we start to add in specific gods, because you got to remember, different people worship God in different ways. So if we start to get too specific, then you set people apart. And that's really not what the militia is for. It's about unity and bringing people together. And essentially, if you believe in the golden rule and that you were created by something, then you can adhere to the laws of America. And that's really the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously.
Hey, we got a hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
Boy, that was a long wait. I do think it's rather rude for a person to put their hand up and then have Mike say, it's okay, you can continue talking to someone else who didn't have their hand up. That's rude. Anyway, beyond that, I've learned a lot as a nurse and as a department head in nursing. When I used to go to meetings and people came into the meetings and saying, this is wrong, that's wrong, I'm complaining about this and I'm complaining about that. One of the first things the department head said, okay, what is your plan to correct it? And then that plan had to be presented as step 1, this is what we're going to do about this. Step 2, this is what we're going to do about that. Nothing is being discussed about what we're going to do about the abysmal abyss that we're in. We have crooked courts, crooked judges, crooked government, crooked everybody. How will we ever get into a court that gives fair judgments when we have evil people appointing these judges? What do we do? What is our plan to fix this? Besides that, with the religious aspect that Eric talked about, a good part of us are here because of what the Bible says in Revelation 18:4. Come out of her, my people. We are instructed to come out of Babylon, not to fix it. We can't fix it. It's destroyed. We have no constitution. What we have now is a corporation running us. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence are to them pieces of paper. And the people that rule us have no regard for them or for us. So what we have to do is start our journey of 1,000 miles by taking one step. First of all, we'd like to hear, what do people want to do as taking the first step? That's my question. I yield.
Okay, I think, Mike, you were next, I believe.
Yeah. So first of all, let me apologize since you took it as being rude. I was in a catch-22 with the fact that Eric was responding to me on an issue that was pretty deep there. So I just thought it would be best to let him finish. So apologies for that.
It's a point of order. It's a point of order. So, okay, let's move on.
Right. So I think the answer to, well, first of all, tonight, our main discussion is what Charles brought up. right, to begin with. Ella just made a point. I was thinking about everything you said, Ella, was in my mind today. I'm like, yeah, we're going to be talking about this stuff tonight, about law and stuff, but what's the point? Our courts are corrupt. The communists have not only taken over and paid for our politicians, but they pay our judges to do their bidding. Well, there's probably a few judges out there that are righteous, but they're more and more being taken out and replaced with evil, tyrannical psychopaths that are just working for that corrupt industry, for that business, for that corporation. So, I mean, I could almost shoot it back to Ella. Well, then why are we doing any of this, right? I mean, yeah, we can't do nothing. Let's just go back to basics. And again, we're just waiting for Jesus to come back, and we'll just kind of go get some, build that little, commune, that little separate society kind of thing. But to me, it ultimately comes back to the ultimate thing we can do. First of all, the ultimate thing I've been trying to do is just get us to grow, right? I mean, organize those of us who have like mind, which again goes back now to the back and forth that Eric and I were having, because who are we organizing, right? Yes, we're militia, but we're trying to organize people that are of like mind with regards to traditional family values, moral virtue, God, opposed to the leftist liberal progressive agenda. So, to the extent that Eric views it as a conflict, I mean, all I can do is say that I know I've made my case, that I've simply put forth an effort to say, those of us who have like mind on these issues, let's organize and grow. And it just so happens that we do constitute the militia. We're the militia. So even with that, I could have done this whole thing without even mentioning militia, right? I just included it in the mix, knowing that ultimately, when we are big enough and strong enough, if we had to utilize the rights that we have, right, as who and what we are, right? Because all of a sudden, as many people have talked about, we have, communist, brutish police forces and military forces now enforcing that corporation's rules and laws against us in opposition to where we stand. Then we need to be able to defend ourselves too, to some extent. It's like I always say, I'll go out in a hailstorm of righteous rounds before I yield and submit to their tyranny. It's just that simple. So Charles is going to kind of give us some guidance here. Eric can piggyback with Charles on, okay, so what can we do? Let's organize it. Let's start doing, like Charles said, let's start doing some practical things that we can actually do. So what can we do, Charles and Eric? I yield.
Charles, do you want to take the lead, or do you want me to take the lead? Because I mean, I have a lot to offer, but I know you do as well. So,
Well, you probably want to talk for a little while. I think I should take it for at least a little while here, Eric. I think you've already had a pretty big chunk of the discussion here, and I haven't talked as much as you, I believe, if I'm calculating correctly. Yeah, I think Mike gave a real good reaffirmation of how I want to bring the group in a particular direction here. And I think Mike is on board with me, and probably most of the rest of the group, in that we need to gently, slowly but surely, start moving towards real projects that are producing something that's tangible, that can help us confront the evil empire conspirators that are destroying the nation. So the coronavirus jury verdict puts us in such a very powerful position. It completely takes out the de facto Article 3 U.S. Supreme Court. It bypasses it. See, they're a municipal franchisee of the civil government that was created in 1789 or modified after the Civil War. They're a de facto government. They're not the government of, by, and for the people. But when we come together and we issue a jury verdict in response to a criminal complaint that's been placed before a body of the people acting as a Supreme Court of law, then we are the people. speaking the will of the people directly to the de facto government. Nobody else does that, at least so far. Nobody does it because they don't know how constitutional due process of law empowers us through when we have final judgments, jury verdicts from a proper constitutional common law court. So I just want to take just a few moments there. I'll wrap up here that this is a very good direction that we're moving in through the documents that I posted the web links to in the chat window. And maybe we can get into some more detail there after Eric goes ahead and has his say, and maybe a few of the others have what they would like to talk about. Then maybe there'll be enough time left over before Mike wants to end the call, where we can go into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of what this coronavirus and vaccine jury verdict is all about. So at that point, I'll yield. Back to you, Dan.
Okay, Eric's next.
All right. Well, thank you, Charles. I absolutely agree. I'm a huge adamant supporter of the common law, and that's something that I too am trying to support and help flourish in this country. And he's right. From the de facto perspective and the way the law is structured, the hierarchy of law, the common law is the superior jurisdiction of the de facto law. Now, this goes back to the reason why I had to create a certain degree of separation, because I operate in multiple jurisdictions where you guys, the militia, right? If you're in the common law as the militia, then you are acting under the common law. It's just different. It's a different lane. And so everybody needs to, learn how to stay in their lanes, because in my estimation, for a very long time, until the large body of Americans wake up, if they ever are going to, there's going to be a huge number of people that are going to continue to need to be dependents of the government. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what the de facto government was established for, is for our territories, for our international dealings, and for people that were wards of the state, frankly. And so if you're not capable of managing your affairs, well, then you have to be a ward of the state. And so in that capacity, you're no longer sovereign and you're no longer capable of managing your affairs. So at that point, someone has to take responsibility if there's no family or community there to do that. And so I think that a retooling of ways is important. And I think that, from my perspective and what I do, I think the de facto government, by and large, is starting to prepare for that. I've seen changes in the way conversations happen, between law enforcement officials and nationals. I've seen differences in the way certain justices actually handle proceedings regarding nationals and their declarations of political status that eliminate them from the 14th Amendment classification. And so I think that all of us working together towards the same goal will produce many more fruits than just focusing on one aspect of the garden. And so that's really where my point of view and my perspective comes from, and 90% of this. And I always try to play devil's advocate, because that's just what I do in the world, is I look at things from a very strategic, tactical standpoint, because frequently I find myself in the grips of these conversations with the de facto government. And many times those conversations can be heated and they require a certain amount of we'll just say wherewithal at this point. But anyway, I yield.
Okay, Mike, you're up.
Yeah, so Charles, you mentioned, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but you said the jury finding on the coronavirus. Can you state it the way you said it? Because I'm trying to, it's not clear to me right now if you're saying it, like theoretically, like we're gonna create one, a jury finding on the coronavirus, or there's been one made already. Well, I'm not sure. Charles, you're muted. Because I'm trying to understand, and if Eric knows anything about that. But Charles,
until Charles gets back on. Oh, there he is. We'll let him go.
Can you repeat the question, Michael?
Yeah, when you mentioned earlier, oh, this coronavirus jury verdict is going to be a good thing for us. Was there one? Or are you saying hypothetically, like we're going to make one? We're going to put forth an effort to get a jury verdict on the coronavirus, or was there one already that you're referencing that we're going to use or go off of?
If you look at the documents linked in the chat window there, and I've sent them out before, I've already completed a rough draft of a jury verdict. I've already got 5 people, counting myself, that have signed on to it. You can see the 5 signatures on the last page of the document, or at least the contact data. And and that jury verdict can be modified. See, we don't have to have separate hearings. All we got to do is get 12 people on the same page, and that's not the final judgment. The final judgment happens after we get 12 people that are willing to sign on to a basic jury verdict, and then.
Charles, I'm going to have to interrupt as you're talking and kind of go back and forth with you here, because there needs to be clarity in this. So when you indicate you prepared a jury verdict, I don't know if you said that right. I mean, because obviously a verdict is when a jury makes a determination of guilt or not, right? So what are you saying? You prepared like the paperwork for putting a jury together? You prepared paperwork for a jury to sign saying that, yes, they want to hear a case on it? To clarify it.
Let me reply, please. Yes, what I've prepared is a rough draft. It's a template for the jurors to come together, and they can say, hey, I don't like this part, change this wording. And I'll get on the computer and I'll change it. And if everybody's in agreement, that'll be the new wording. And,
okay, hold on. I want to do a step-by-step with you. So you've started the rough draft of you're calling it a jury verdict. It's confusing for me. Maybe it's called something else. You created essentially, because I'm thinking, would it be more proper to call it a complaint or in other words, an indictment, something of that nature? Is that?
No. If you look at the other web link, that's our complaint. And a complaint is an indictment. It's better than an indictment because it's a real person doing it rather than a legal fiction attorney general. So we've got a complaint from a member of the organic body politic before our Supreme Court of Law, common law jurisdiction. And we've got the complaint, and we've got a model jury verdict that we're working from as a template to try to bring 12 people together.
Right, on that point there, does it have to be 12 people from a specific county or city or state? Can they be from all over? What is that? 12 what people?
It's designed to be American national. It would be best if we had 12 people from 12 different parts of the country.
Okay. So carry on. I'm just trying to get this step-by-step sequential understanding of what it is. You've prepared documents which, again, I haven't read through them. I'll read through them and I'll send them out. I'll email it to everybody. But again, you said you're working on it. Do you want me to send it out or wait till you're done? Or you want me to send it?
It's a rough draft. It's designed to be disseminated amongst the people. We might have people willing to sign on right now, but they don't like this particular wording. I'll change the wording and we'll send out the new copy to everybody that's already signed on, and hopefully there will be consensus on the new wording, and we'll continue to grow like that.
Okay, so what is going to be the purpose ultimately of this? Let's say we all look at it like, wow, this is a good complaint. This is a good indictment. This is a good, this is going against who?
Gates and Fauci are the primary named defendants. And I believe we started it in the Trump administration. Trump was named. I think Biden's named too. Are
you familiar with the Dr. David Martin 200-page Anthony Fauci dossier?
I'm familiar with David Martin's work.
Are you familiar with the 200-page Anthony Fauci dossier? Just for the record for everybody, you can let me know if you knew this or not. Back on February 14th of this year, there's another man whose name is not coming to my head right now, but he's in the circles, a well-known constitutional scholar. I was tempted to try to have him come on here with us tonight as well. He's all about constitutional law, and he put out a email where they were trying to get people from around the country on February 14th at 3 p.m. All of you Americans, take this 200-page Anthony Fauci dossier that was prepared by Dr. David Martin. It's a criminal complaint against Fauci, Gates, Pfizer, numerous other peoples, like 8. Take that to your local state attorney and deliver it so that they have it, because that puts them on notice. They now have to do something about it. There's a whole video on my website where I did that, and I had they committed battery against me when I went into the place. They knew I was coming, and I filed complaints. I went through internal reviews with the police department because they tried to cover up for the state attorney's office. But then the final report from internal review indicated that, in fact, battery was committed against me by the state attorney's chief investigator. So it was a whole thing I had going on just because I put forth an effort to deliver Dr. Anthony Fauci's 200-page Anthony Fauci dossier to the Miami-Dade County State Attorney, Catherine Fernandez Rundle. So there was people all around the country doing that. I'm one of the ones that did it and ended up getting some great video footage as a result of being, wronged, right? When I went to the public building to deliver it, which I recorded all that, which is another side issue, because for me, that's a lawsuit. And I'm hoping to bring up a lawsuit against the state attorney's office for that, because they
Stay focused, Mike. Stay focused.
So that Anthony Fauci dossier, see this, it's focused and not out of focus to be discussing this, because I mean, it would seem to me that it would behoove Charles to read that entire 200-page Anthony Fauci dossier and see what might be in there that we can utilize, if not utilize it,
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Eric had his hand up. Should we follow?
You go ahead and respond, Charles, and then let Eric respond.
Okay. Thank you. Quickly. I lost my train of thought.
I was saying about the 200-page Anthony Fauci dossier.
Yeah. I got it. Thank you for refreshing my memory. We've got more than enough evidence already to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt to reasonable people. We're swamped in overwhelming mountains of evidence about the corruption, okay? We don't need any more evidence to prove the corruption and the lies that are being perpetrated at us. All we need is a small nucleus of well-focused issues and 12 people signing on that saying this is the truth, and then crack the nut, crack the evil empire shell of external defense mechanism where they've got their own defenses up. We need to place a crack in that. And then we can bring in the other evidence later on after we get something up and running. Like, you don't need an AR-15 to defend yourself against a couple of wild dogs. All you need is an old musket or a bow and arrow. That'll do the job just fine. That's all we need. We just need to get something up and running. We don't need to have everything documented like we got a team of lawyers working on it. I yield.
Yeah, Eric?
Yeah, so Charles is absolutely right. So Mike, just to kind of add some clarity to all this, what you're talking about is something that is going to take place in a completely different jurisdiction, because these people that you're speaking of, even though they're trying to do the right things, they're doing so from the de facto jurisdiction. And so what Charles is talking about, and I'm in support of, and I'll read through the document when I have an opportunity to really examine it, Charles, and I may be in support of it too. So you may be able to count your number as 6, because I also am capable of operating as an American national. So these issues here, we're kind of starting to blur the line again, because one, what Charles is talking about and what we need to establish the militia in is the common law. And, the de facto law doesn't necessarily apply to those that are American nationals or state citizens. In fact, it doesn't. The statutory law and code doesn't apply at all until you cross over the jurisdictional boundaries. And so there has to be a basic understanding of those boundaries and where those lie, which would be a conversation for another time. I yield.
Okay, floor is open.
You got any thoughts, Dan?
Well, it's apparent that we're not all on the same page. We're getting closer, but we're not quite on the same page because we're coming at this problem in the country from a couple different angles. I think
Okay, Mo.
somebody needs to mute their phone. Anyway, what we need to remember is that we're in the midst of a communist insurgency. Okay, this isn't just a little glitch in a operating Christian constitutional republic. That has been eliminated. Okay, no matter what anybody says, that does not function in this country anymore. I've been into the courts. They do not honor it. Rare occasions, maybe once in a while, but if in general they do not honor it. We are in the midst of a communist takedown of these united sovereign states. That's what we're in the midst of. And so how do we combat that? And I'm hearing a hybrid solution where part of it's going to be de facto, part of it's going to be de jure. I'm of the opinion that we're in a war. And the first thing that goes out the window when you're in a war is the rules and regulations, just like the Geneva Convention. Everybody agrees the Geneva Convention's a humane way to conduct war. And yet every combat soldier will tell you, as soon as the bullets start flying, nobody gives a damn about the Geneva Convention. That's just the way it is. And so my way of looking at it is we're in a war, we're taking casualties, they're destroying our infrastructure, they're destroying lives. How much more of a war do we need to see to realize that this is a hot war? And the only thing is wrong is our side hasn't entered into the fight. The enemy is doing everything they can to kill as many of us as possible this very day. So I'm kind of confused where everybody thinks we're going with this. I'm looking at this as a soldier, okay? Because once you figure out you're in a war, it becomes a military operation. Just like the founding fathers, when the first shot was fired at Lexington Green, all that rhetoric went right out the window, okay? Because now it's hot. Lives are at stake. You've got to defend yourselves. All the rules and regulations are out the window. It's dog eat dog. The winners get to make the new rules and they're going to rewrite the history. That's just the way the world works. So we're in a war against an enemy that does not honor any of the things we're talking about. We really don't. And Mao Zedong said it, all political power comes from the end of a rifle. That's your enemy speaking right there, communist Chinese. Okay, he said it. And it's a fact, okay? When the Bolsheviks took over Russia, they did it at the end of a barrel of a rifle. They didn't do it with legal paperwork or declaring sovereignty or having even common law courts. They just simply went in and said, if you're against this, we're going to kill you. And they ended up winning because they had more money in their pockets than the other guys. So they bought off the right people. So again, I'm seeing that we seem to forget that this is a hot war that we're in. And I think personally, we're taking too much of a concern of how our enemy's going to react to us defending ourselves. We're allowed to defend ourselves, whatever way we want to defend it, whatever system we want to set up. We don't have to model it after anything because the enemy's not going to respect that anyway. So why don't we just focus on what is our way of handling this? What form of governance? And because we're going to have disputes, so you have to have some sort of a court system and a jury system, exactly as the Bible and our founding fathers set up, to adjudicate problems amongst our own group, etc. And when we have enemy combatants who are captured by our forces, we're going to have to be able to hold trial and put them on trial, etc. Okay, that's what I see is what we should be establishing, and we can't keep a foot in both venues. That's just my way of looking at it. I yield.
So Dan, if I might respond, I think I had my hand up first. You correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe they're not in order on my screen, unfortunately, but Eric, I believe you were next. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
Eric,
so
yeah, Eric,
just-
and then I put mine down so Charles could go the next.
So Charles, I'm sorry. So Dan, in a lot of ways, you're accurate. You're very accurate. But in a lot of ways, there's something that's being missed here, and that is, first off, strategy. You as a soldier, God bless the Air Force. I was airborne, so I can appreciate the Air Force in a very special way. So we have to look at this from a broader scope. We have to look at it from a very strategic standpoint. And what we have here is we have some very key focus in certain areas. Like, for example, Charles is working to establish just what you said, a useful form of self-governance, right? What I'm looking at is I'm looking at a way to get to the de facto to yield to that form of self-governance in a peaceful manner. And what Mike is working for is the establishment of the militia. And all these three things, they're all different avenues of attack. You're right. But they're very necessary at this juncture, because if we're not looking at this from different perspectives and attacking this from different positions, then we're losing opportunity. And that gives our enemy the ability to gain advantage over us. So from a strategic standpoint, from a soldier standpoint, I think what we're doing is beautiful, and I think we need to keep on. But what we need, like you said, is some pinpoint focus. So like the militia needs to be focused on doing just that task, establishing the militia. Charles, needs to be focused just on establishing the common law jurisdiction. And I need to be focused on the task that I have laid before me, which is dealing with the de facto jurisdiction. And anybody that has specialties that wants to step in line with us, more than welcome. In fact, needed desperately. Would love any help that anybody could provide, because honestly, 3 or 4 people aren't going to be what does this. It's the American people. And most of all, we need the apparent opinion and consensus of the American people, because at the end of the day, we're all individually responsible for ourselves. So, with that, I'm going to yield.
Okay, Charles, you're next.
Thank you, Dan. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Dan, to your issues, and I appreciate what Eric said and Mike, but to your issue about, and I like the way you're helping it to percolate up to the top so that we're able to focus more directly on our prioritized issues of concern for each of us. That's very good. That's very healthy. But in pursuing that further to the next step, building on what you said, especially concerning administration of force and how we balance out all these conditions and how we organize militia to defend the people against what's going on. The American constitutional system, the 1789 document that was adopted then, that had common law provisions and remedies built into it, especially within the Bill of Rights, especially within the 5th, 6th, and 7th Amendment that talks about due process of law, local districts, precincts having criminal jurisdiction in the 6th Amendment, and the rules of the common law in the 7th Amendment, and jury trials in the 7th Amendment. All of that fits together to establish what military people refer to as, quote, the rules of engagement, unquote, okay? And this is why after the so-called Civil War, they passed the so-called, quote, Posse Comitatus Act, unquote, okay? That's because it's all supposed to be decentralized, like the 6th Amendment talks about, down to the states and the counties and the local districts, which are actually the precincts underneath it. That's where the blades come out. That's where our lawful authority is at. And when we follow constitutional due process of law, our court issues warrants. Okay, you were concerned, you were talking about, Dan, we're in a war. Okay, the word war is related to the word warrant. The two words are related because criminals are deemed to be at war against the common people. A crime against one member of the body politic is a crime against the entire body politic. And when that has been adjudicated by constitutional due process of law, then the community is warranted and the judicial officers are warranted in assembling, quote, whatever force is necessary, unquote, AKA the militia or posse comitatus, and enforcing the proper and judicially issued warrants as against the people that are at war, have been lawfully adjudicated to be at war against the organic body politic of the local and the larger American national organic body politic. I yield.
Okay, I think, Mike, were you next?
Yeah, and wow, I got a mindful, so let me try to get it out, man.
Spit it out.
Yeah, so see, first of all, I just want to piggyback on Dan and support Dan and say I totally agree with Dan. You know, what was going through my mind, and this is just figurative to make the point, as I was listening to Dan speak, I'm imagining 6 million of us going over and taking certain people into custody and hanging them. And I know that's where Dan's coming from. He's coming with the fact that there's all of us, the vast majority of Americans can finger point and pinpoint certain people right now that are criminals, that have got away from crimes, that have hijacked our government, and they're wronging the American people. They're criminals, and they need to be held accountable. So how do you do that? Let's all get now we're falling into their trap. Let's all get our arms and go storm the Capitol and take them into custody. We know we can't do it that way, because that way, you know, if we had 6 million armed people, me and Dan could probably have a private meeting and discuss specifics about who needs to be taken into custody and why, and articulate that, and then come to you legal guys and you articulate on paper legally why they need to be taken into custody. And we could still go do that. And now we've got the force to do it. Go take them, drag them out, string them up, because that's what should happen. But the crossover is the points that Eric was making and that Charles was making, right? That the effort here, knowing that they're waiting for opportunities to take into custody patriots and truthers, and they want to create a civil war. The concept of war that we're accustomed to is the concept of war that they created with World War I and World War II and their industrial war complex, right? You know, to kill millions of people, right? So even if we had a couple million people where we decided we're all armed, we've got our leaders, we've got our document, we're going to go, what's to keep them? Because they're in charge and they got the money. And we know that the Rothschilds funded both sides of every war during World War I and World War II and every other war. So who's to say that they're not going to order NATO and the blue hats and to all come and take us out even, right? So that's why it's while it would be fun and nice and just for us to be able to go over there and take into custody the criminals that are literal criminals, you know, and I don't want to get into the details of that. We all know who they are. We all know who that is. You know, the ones that stand up behind the president of the United States when he's giving a speech and shred federal documents behind his back when he's giving a speech, right? The one that takes and smashes up her phones and pours bleach all over it when Congress subpoenaed those phones, right? We know, you know, we can go through the list of who the criminals are. But again, that's what it's about, I think. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we're trying to be smart and strategic about it, right? But at the same time, we need to build and grow. Yes, the militia, we the people who are the militia, who have the right to assemble, who have the right to bear arms, need to start organizing and growing in their counties, right? Point men, point women, growing, getting people to jump on board, target practice, gun safety training, grow, become, so we can all coordinate, which Eric is also assisting with that, we're going to get coordinated from county to county, state to state. We do need to grow. That's what I've been pushing. So we're fortunate to have Charles and Eric from the legal perspective, making the points that as we're growing and becoming a literal physical force to be reckoned with, we're working on the warrants so that we can actually go legally, lawfully, take the people that we know to be taken into custody. That's my understanding of it. I yield.
I think Tave is next.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. with that being said, with the process that we're trying to look at and go forward here with, what is an actual time reality based on a calendar that we can look at and say, okay, let's project out how soon can this happen? Number one. Number two, once it's set in motion, therefore, once you get that moving, it can be applied, and it's going to have to be applied nationwide. So you're going to have a large mass amount of people to just go through with this process that you guys are talking about, to do the warrants and whatnot, to hold these people accountable. But then who's to say that during that, because of the numbers that we're going to have, I mean, we're going to be outnumbered. We know that. They're not going to, I hate to say it, the warrants, like it comes to war. And like Dan said, it comes down to the rules of engagement. When I go to war, I go to fight somebody in the street, there ain't no rules. I am going to win. That's all I give a shit about. How do I have to do this to win? If it has to be to the extremist level, or hopefully to the most simplest level, if it becomes physical. Now we're talking about peacefully and lawfully. Once that starts, we already know they're not going to do that. They're not going to be lawful to us or peaceful. So how are we going to get the reaction to, what is going to be our reaction to theirs denying everything that we have to offer and what we're saying? Are they going to turn the military or whoever on us as a minority and be able to just swoop us up and lock us up or put us down? How fast can all this happen where it has to happen? I mean, we're running out of time. That's what I'm trying to say. The calendar, the days are short and the nights are getting shorter. So I yield with that.
Charles, you're up.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dave. Let me take my hand down here. Yes, the due process of common law is the most powerful position on the chessboard. Okay, and that takes out the bar member attorneys and the judicial officers, and they're the highest decision-making authority in the de facto government. Everything else is administrative, executive, emergency war powers. We are a higher form of law than the highest form of law in the Roman Empire, civil municipal form of American national government and state governments. We are a higher form of law. And another big point is that we're not going to do anything unless all 12 of our jurors unanimously agree that this is prudent and it's appropriate, and we can accomplish the mission with minimal bloodshed, with minimal social trauma. Okay, and that's the goal. Upholding truth and justice and peace for the people long term with minimal social trauma and minimal bloodshed. And we can't compromise that. Okay, we got to draw a line in the sand, so to speak, and say, look, this is our juror's judgment. And the one that we've got here, it's not talking about any arrest warrants. We can do future judgments that are talking about arrest warrants. This one's tame. They shouldn't come at us and start arresting us just because we're saying their lies about coronavirus are a bunch of lies. Their lies about the vaccine are a bunch of lies. That's all we're saying at this very simple and tame jury verdict that's just priming the pump to get us going to start assuming the most powerful positions on the spiritual warfare chessboard. That's all we're doing here. And it's real tame. If you all just spend a little bit of time looking at it, I think you'll see that. And there's very little risk to any of us trying to develop a consensus about what around whatever's already put in the document. We can make modifications, but we got to get 12 people together on the same basic document, and then we take it public. Then we call Gates and Fauci in, and we've not formally published it as a final verdict yet. But after they default and they fail to appear, and we've done plenty of media outreach, then our 12 people come together and say, yeah, they defaulted. Go ahead. I hereby affirm on video, recorded right off of Zoom, that this is part of my verdict. They failed to appear. We have probable cause evidence to prove our case beyond all reasonable doubt. And we got to do something about it, because just like said in our paperwork, our country's being destroyed by evil empire conspirators. This is about more than just the coronavirus and the vaccine. This is about the survival of America. Okay, and that's how we're framing it. And I dare say, if we move forward with a plan like what's set out forth in these documents, that we're going to minimize the risk of bloodshed, and we're going to maximize our capabilities of taking the country back from the evil empire conspirators and moving it over to a common law compliant form of government, long-term biblical Torah law compliant form of government, where God's peace and justice and happiness for the common people can reign on this earth. Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Tave's probably going to want to say, although I think you covered it, Charles, what if they don't accept that, right? Like, he already said that, and you answered it. It's going to get a point where we're just doing everything we can to make it peaceful and lawful as far as we possibly can. And hopefully in the interim of doing that, we're growing as a armed force that we have the right to be. We are the militia. We have the right to assemble. We have the right to bear arms. And we have the right to go target practice, and we have the right to have gun safety training at ranges, and we have the right to grow and coalesce. And that's what we need to be doing. So again, this is right now just a message. I mean, how many people out there, have the ability to hear what we're saying and jump on board and become a point man, a point woman in your community, and become a leader in your community. Again, preferably, veterans that served as Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and Green Beret, right? Preferably, right? You see what we're doing here. Come on, it's everything we could do to the umpth degree, lawful and peaceful, to take care of these corrupt, evil bastards that have destroyed our nation and intend to destroy humanity. So hopefully we grow big enough that when it gets to the point that we have to take forceful action, because it's the ultimate last alternative, because we've done everything else lawful and peaceful, then we'll be prepared to do that. I yield. I'll be checking out. Dan, please read through the paperwork from Charles. I will too. Tave, read through it. There's 3 more signatures right there. I'm going to be a signature on it by all means.
All right.
And again,
got Dave.
the bigvirushoax.com has all the proof for sure. Aside from whatever they already have, it's all on that website. And I've been doing that for 2 years. And again, there is the information that was gathered by, Reiner Fulmich and their little group, and, all this stuff that's supposedly happening. So I yield.
Yep. Dave, your hand's up.
All right, thanks, Mr. Speaker. With the weaponization already of the FBI and the IRS now doing their thing, what are we looking at where we see the January 6th shenanigans, the meandering, I like to call it, a half-assed radical group of people that were involved in a complete, I want to say, unorganized and chaotic weekend event that had no bearing whatsoever, except being led by those same FBI people, because they've already known that a large group of people amassing to do what we are by far, what we are talking about legally and doing it the proper way, would put more of a target on our backs as we sit and speak today than any of those guys that walked through the Capitol and didn't do anything, other than the guys that actually put hands on or killed somebody, and whoever Ashley Babbitt. But does that not make them more to target us and squander what we're trying to do? Because they're looking for it. If they're not, they're completely asinine. But I'm sure they're looking for it. So what happens when we get to a point to where, like Mike said, we're at that point now, it's stalled. The wheels stop spinning, and it's either going to be, I point my finger and tell you I'm coming in there to drag you out by your hair, or you're going to leave. You got one or two choices. Is it going to come to that? And when it does, or is it going to be, I'm trying to figure out how to say it's the easiest way to, so every guys understand it. Without bloodshed, with what we're talking about now, legally, where they could come in right now and say, you, and they come on, I'm just like Mike, dead end street, you're coming down here one time. This now puts us a way bigger target involving where they can say, okay, now these guys got their shit together. They at least are talking amongst each other, which they don't want us to do. That was the whole purpose of the coronavirus. But are we going to be able to get past that and to be able to rise to get that number to do it? Because to me, it seems like with the weaponization of the FBI and all the power that they have, it's like we're fighting God. To be honest with you, I yield.
Okay. Charles?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dave. Again, our American constitutional system was set up for solutions. The founders knew that it would probably deteriorate to a point like what we have today, and where we're going to have to alter, reform, or abolish the government in the manner that we think is proper, because it's all falling apart, it's all deteriorating, and there's many statutes in many of the states that work to our benefit. I'm thinking of one Oregon statute that says that when a peace officer, and that would include our town constables and our justice of the peace and our sheriffs, that when a peace officer has apprehension that his ability to execute the process is the wording, but that would include arrest warrants or eviction orders or anything like that. When he has apprehension that there may be too much force resistance to his ability to enforce the warrant that's been properly administered by a court of law, when he thinks that he doesn't have enough people to support him, that the statute reads, he may command the obedience of as many members of the organic body politic community as he thinks is necessary in order for him to go ahead and move forward and execute the process of the court. Okay, so if our courts do not have enough people actively enlisted in the militia, we got the statutorily recognized and common law recognized right to command others to assist us in promoting justice and keeping the peace in our smaller and local communities. This places us at a higher level. Again, this is the most peaceable and the most lawful solution available to us in the current predicament that we're in. And I admit it's very fragile, and that the evil empire conspirators could come at us and arrest us all and drag us off to FEMA camps. But if we move slowly and strategically, I don't think that's what's going to happen, because there's divisions between the judiciary and the executive, and a lot of the lawyers, I've been up against a lot of lawyers in a lot of courtroom situations, and the lawyers and the judges rather enjoy us taking real hardball issues into the courtroom settings and talking about that, because at that point, the executive officers that are also in that courtroom are sitting down and being quiet and paying real close attention to what our judicial officers are saying and what the de facto Roman civil municipal judicial officers and attorneys are saying. And see, at that particular point, when we are arguing the real issues before the de facto courts, then the de facto executive power is in its box. It's under the control of the judiciary, which is rare. Almost never is the de facto executive officers under the control of the de facto judiciary. But when we are in the de facto courts and we are arguing constitutional issues in our own arrest warrants before the de facto judges, then at that point, the de facto judges are in a position to merge with us and grant us color of legitimacy and to put the de facto executive officers in a box. And that's where we need to go. That's the strategy of minimal chance of bloodshed, minimal chance of social trauma. And that's exactly where we want to be on the metaphysical spiritual chessboard, to keep the blood count, the body count to a minimum as we move forward in taking this country back to God and away from the devil. I yield.
Yeah, just a quick note, after Nick, I'm gonna stop the recording, but this time I'll stop the recording and not the meeting. Go ahead, Nick.
Because you did stop the meeting last time, right?
Accidentally, yeah, I apologize about that. But this time I'm just gonna
I
stop the
thought
recording.
that. Okay. Hey, Dan, I guess you mentioned that you read Pastor Truehella's book. Is that correct?
Yeah, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate.
And Mike, have you read that, or are you aware of this Pastor Matt Truehella? I guess he's up in Wisconsin.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, I'll just ask Dan, what did you think? I haven't read the book myself. I mean, the site looks interesting. And I'll let you answer, and I'll listen to your answer offline. I yield.
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
I'm just so you guys know, I'm gonna go ahead because Charles did a good job of addressing the purpose of this meeting tonight, as well as Eric and others. So I'm just gonna stop the recording, make sure I do this right this time. Recording.